My parents taught me a lot about love. For my parents growing up in the 1950s, love meant getting married, having kids, and then getting divorced. It was that simple. Love was something ephemeral to be bartered, and if the going got rough, the contract could easily be broken. What's love got to do with it? If you didn't get along with someone in your family, you simply stopped talking to them permanently. Mother and daughter, son and father, no matter. It was ultimately my grandparents who provided the quintessential answers to this great mystery of life. Grandma Helen loved me unconditionally. When I had breakfast with her, she wanted to know what I would have for lunch. When I had lunch, she wanted to know what I was having for dinner. Her love knew no bounds. Like the time I accidentally swallowed a dime, this is not a Jewish joke, as she made sure it passed through to the other side, searching for it assiduously in my bowel movements. Despite my yelling, "No, Grandma, stop, that's disgusting." When it was time to go to college, she wrote a letter to my stepfather, letting him know she would take care of everything. Same for medical school. When I needed money to open a medical practice, I got a check for $125,000 that magically appeared in the mail one day. She lived off Social Security and savings. And when I asked her how she could afford this, she told me, "Richard, darling, it's all yours." And it was unconditional love in spades. How can we really know romance deeply without somehow experiencing that profound love? So, with a childhood like mine from a divorced family, I had a difficult time knowing the difference between the fantasy of romance and what was real and everlasting. Romance and grief were intertwined. I knew love as a way of connecting, a friendship with sexual benefits. Relationships filled the void of loneliness. It seemed impossible to know another intimately without judgment. It was like suffering from the Woody Allen syndrome. I would morph into Zelig to accommodate whomever I was with. And then it happened unexpectedly, out of the blue. I knew it the first time ever I saw Lee's face. Something spoke from deep inside me, forcing me out of that chair in her brother Angelo's chiropractic office. When our eyes met, I was pulled out of my chair like a magnet pulled to the opposite pole. And without thinking, I got up, walked over to Lee, got down on one knee, and took her hand. "Who are you?" I asked, as I blushed a crimson reflecting the fire burning within me. I'd never done this before. It was at that moment the fantasy of romance met the reality of love. My heart, not my head, was speaking a language I had not yet heard in this lifetime. Yet the gift was immediate. My heart had found its home. There was only one problem. As this new blush of romance was beginning to bloom, I'd given my word to another woman that I would not leave her. Like me, she was also insecure in the arena of love. I had felt abandoned after my parents' divorce and was afraid of commitment, and she suffered the same lessons of loss, believing love was dangerous. So I gave my word that I would not leave her, and because I was a man of my word, I didn't. And then I met Lee. Lee and I would meet once a week at Angelo's home and sit across the table having dinner, experiencing a longing and deep care, yet unable to express it. The feeling was so intense that one evening after dinner, sitting in the living room during the cold winter of 1992, the most wonderful experience engulfed us. The angel of love came down to bless us. I mean it, not figuratively, literally. At first, I thought I was the only one to experience it. Yet later that evening, When I opened up and shared my experience, Angelo, Susan, and Lee had all felt it. A palpable presence of love. It was miraculous. It was that enchanted evening I met an angel of love, and yet I had to tell Lee that although my heart belonged to her, I could not be with her. She left for Colorado shortly afterwards, tears flowing down her cheeks, not understanding how a love so strong could have such an abrupt ending. Romance revisited us 2 years later, when the relationship I promised to be in was ending in divorce. I had to live out my parents' storyline before embracing the true gift of love. And yet somehow it was perfect. Lee knew my word was my bond, and because of her own insecurities and Sicilian jealousy, this foundation was essential for our solid relationship. I never imagined romance would be like this, and remember now that poem from over 50 years ago. If you love something, let it go, and it will come back to you if it's yours. Letting go of love meant that Lee and I had to release all attachments for 2 years, and love came back to us in the most wonderful and unexpected manner. After not speaking for 2 years, 2 psychics told Lee it was time to come back to Colorado, leave Colorado, and come back to New York. At the same time, my relationship had fallen apart, and a space opened up so we could finally be together. Within 1 week of my ex-wife moving out, Lee was magically in my living room, ready for us to be together. The angel of love had come down to bless us in the first days of our meetings and had guided our paths together years later. Despite elements of grief having to be layered off my broken heart. Now, we revisit romance every day in simple acts of making each other a cup of coffee, speaking baby talk, the first morning kiss, a kiss after breakfast, the kiss before going to work, the kiss coming home. I've learned a lot about love, and there's one thing I am sure of. No matter what your life's griefs and disappointments, love can find a way back into your life if you don't give up hope and keep an open heart. Sometimes, when you least expect it, the miracle of love will appear and change your life in ways you could never imagine.
The first time ever I saw your face, time stood still. It was a moment of instant recognition, a feeling of magnetism as our eyes locked and you got up from your chair and walked over to me, got down on one knee and kissed my hand. A timeless love remembering itself. It seemed divinely orchestrated, especially after that amazing evening when the angels came down to heal and care for us with Angelo and Susan present. Remember how we used essential oils, Reiki, massage, chiropractic, and sound healing, all hands and hearts on deck. The great love that manifested that evening seemed to endow our romance with a cosmic seal of approval. However, as you know, my love, the fantasy of romance fatally collided with the reality of romance when you told me later that night that we couldn't be together, that you had given your word to another woman, and your word was your bond. When we released one another, remember how you invited me to meet you under an imaginary waterfall of eternal love whenever I needed to feel your love? Which I did often. Your thoughtfulness and kindness touched me so. I drove back to Colorado alone with feelings of loneliness and loss as my passengers, perplexed that the man I felt certain was my soulmate I was leaving behind. Well, truth is, I needed to go back to end and free myself from that painful 9-year relationship, which led me to a vision quest in Costa Rica, facing my fears, and a near-death experience at the ocean in Tierra de Milagros, land of miracles. It was a miracle I survived that severe intestinal infection with only Greta's awful soup. A miracle I made it home from deep within the jungles of the Osa Peninsula. A miracle I broke free. And once I did, the universe started giving me very clear signals that my life and work in Colorado were coming to an end. So I prayed and meditated, asking and listening for my next move. And after 6 weeks, within the same weekend, 2 different psychics gave me the exact message. What are you doing here in Colorado? You belong in New York, where the love of your life awaits. What I couldn't possibly have imagined was that you and that woman you married called it quits that same weekend, and that the angels would bring us back together 2 years later to our romance revisited. But things were different. You were different. Romance now needed to be tended with gentleness and compassion. Your heart needed healing from your recent painful marriage. Give him time, my inner wisdom suggested. So we took it slow until we didn't. It was important for me to have my own job and apartment while we dated. So I got an interim position as a speech pathologist an hour away. The drive to your beautiful house each weekend was so exciting. The longing and the lust. No matter that we were both 40 years old. Remember how we'd romp around without a care in the world, like kids, experiencing the fantasy of romance with all its glitter and gold. Speaking of gold, do you remember our Valentine's Day love story? How you escorted me blindfolded into your living room, hearing the sounds of John Coltrane and the crackling of logs in the fireplace. You removed my blindfold, and the vision of 40 candles flickering all around us was scintillating. When you served the champagne, I suspected what was coming next. Seeing you bring out that little square black box, my heart leapt. Remember my surprise upon opening and gazing at this strange yet familiar ring? Instead of gleaming, the stone was dull. In fact, it wasn't a stone at all. You had rolled up tiny pieces of newspaper and stuffed them into a setting, reenacting my nightmare from weeks before. I was horrified. and then touched that you remembered. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry until you brought out the real ring. And then I laughed and cried all at once. Our getting engaged on Valentine's Day was all I imagined romance would be when I was young. Embracing that love meant so much more now that we were mysteriously reunited. Call it kismet, destiny, purpose. And through all the ups and downs in our 27 years together, I am so grateful to have grown through all these experiences with you, my love, and to have woven such a thick, enduring tapestry of love. I continue to adore you. Your life and work inspire me. The man you are inspires me. And the pride and admiration I have for you makes me your #1 fan. Your love has healed so many of my wounds, feeling unworthy, unlovable, insecure, and insanely jealous. In fact, as painful as it was, by you keeping your word with that woman, once we were together again, I knew I could trust you to keep your word with me. You continue to be my best cheerleader, my best friend and playmate. And you provide a loving and safe container for my thoughts, feelings, and for me to be myself. And you've literally saved my life again and again. If that ain't romance, I don't know what is.